So we're getting into the thick of the dynasty season, and it matters now more than ever what players you are adding to the back end of your roster. So Alexander and I are going to give you 4 long shots in 2023. Some players you may not have even had on the radar that we think you probably should. Check this out. All right, Alexander, here we are back again. Brand new video, 4 shiny new names for the viewing audience. I want to start right off the bat with a wide receiver in this group, someone that was very surprising last year, and with some of the alterations to this existing roster, may be able to expand on what we saw in 2022 and probably even better that in 2023, and that is Rashid Shaheed of the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, Shaheed is a very dynamic receiver. He's a deep ball specialist. His average yards per reception was 17.4 from weeks 12 to 18 with 3 or more targets. He averaged 11.1 fantasy points per game. So he is catching deep balls and catching touchdowns. And he's extremely dynamic as an undrafted player. And combined with Derek Carr coming in, the Saints were on the bottom 10 in pass attempts. Raiders last year were 11th in pass attempts. So I can imagine that we get a lot more pass attempts coming around, and Carr uses more of his aggressiveness to kind of target Shaheed downfield and utilize that skill set where he's a fantastic receiver downfield, and he had a passer rating of 138.4. For reference, perfect passer rating is 158.3. So
no, I was really excited when you put him on the list. Looking back at his stuff here, so wide receiver 72 on keep trade cut. So again, we're in Dartville out here. That's Isaiah Hodgins, that's Michael Gallup, that's DJ Chark, that's Curtis Samuel. So obviously there's a lot of speculative players within this range, but Shaheed is one that's very much under the radar. The Saints knew what they were getting when they brought him in as an undrafted free agent. They actually gave him more money than any 6th-round pick in 2022 as an undrafted guy, and I think that's how much they appreciated his talents. Didn't play his first snap until week 6. PFF graded him at an 80 overall offensively last year, which was an exceptional score. And then he went absolutely nuclear on the deep and intermediate routes last year. You might have mentioned this, but we're looking at his deep targets, 20.6% of his deep targets, 85.7% catch rate out there, 17.6% rate on medium targets. And then we look at him getting paired with Derek Carr, which I think is an absolutely phenomenal combination. Some people, again, don't love Derek Carr, but Derek Carr in 2022 was number 5 in deep ball attempts, number 5 in air yards, number 5 in money throws, and number 8 in danger plays. So if anybody's going to be pushing the ball downfield, it's going to be Derek Carr. And you look at this depth chart, and it's fairly wide open, and you and I were talking about this. This depth chart has the ghost of so many previously beloved names on it. I actually lost count. I think there's as many as 5 on here. So we've got Brian Edwards, we've got Traquan Smith, remember these names, we've got James Washington, we've got Lynn Bowden, and we've got Kiki QT. So 5 players that once upon a time all had some buzz, all had some value, everybody loved them. Now they're on the outside looking in. The only name that you and I agree would be even a marginal threat at this point is probably A.T. Perry, but Rashid Shaheed has earned his role. So Chris Olave, one of the starters, Rashid Shaheed, and then Michael Thomas. And that's where it gets interesting, because over the last 3 years, Michael Thomas has played in just 10 games. So he's no shoe-in to play a full season. In fact, I guess if we were betting, we would probably bet against it. But then you look at Rashid last season over his final 3 weeks, he had a target share of 24.2% in this offense. So assuming he's only battling with Chris Olave, it would not surprise me at all to see him more than double the targets that he saw last year, which was only 34. So really exciting player to add to those rosters, especially again in best ball formats. I think this is a guy you want to own.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's just extremely dynamic, and, the passer rating when targeted, obviously it's, potentially a small sample size. But again, they leverage that guy in space, and he's super efficient. So I think he's definitely a guy that could, outbeat all those ghosts on the depth chart. And end up being the 3rd guy, if not the 2nd guy on that roster at wide receiver.
Those ghosts have already beaten themselves. Those ghosts they're long.
Some of them never got in, they just have always been on the outsides.
They're long gone. All right, here's someone who's not long gone. Let's move over to this guy. Tight end 15 on keep trade cut, not 24 years old yet. Don't want to dice his name, so I'm going to say it on behalf of everybody. Chig Okonkwo. He's a guy that obviously we saw a flash last year, and he's on some radars, but the fact that he's at the tight end 15 is really interesting because on a previous video, we talked about Cole Kmet and the recency bias associated with Justin Fields and how that affected Kmet's value, despite the fact that he was the only tight end on the roster of any consequence and he got a contract extension. Now we're looking at Chig, who clearly played extremely well last year. No real superior competition for his particular skill set, but yet we see him at tight end 15 because of the fear of, I'm assuming, Derrick Henry and maybe some additional wide receivers added to this roster. Why is Chig a guy that people should definitely be going after?
I think Chig, with guys with minimum, tight ends with minimum 40, 46 targets, he was first in yards after catch and average yards after catch above expectations. So with that being said, he's extremely dynamic in the open space, and he's going to be, if his snap share increased throughout the entire season. It kind of fluctuated back and forth, but there were games where he was heavily utilized. But overall, the overarching trend was that he was increasing in snap share. With that being said, I mean, it's a run-heavy offense. He's going to be utilized in two tight end sets, and he's going to be targeted just like the past tight ends that have been on this offense, someone like Jonnu Smith that fit in that kind of skill set that Tannehill likes.
Look, I was a fan of his game last year. Obviously, he was a guy that a lot of people were adding on waivers. In standard formats, PPR, but non-tight end premium, I still really like him. Again, not 24 years old yet, and his rookie season was really impressive. If we look back on the numbers over here, in fact, when we're looking at just receptions and looking at receiving yards, there's only 28 tight ends in history that achieved the production that he put up. And I was looking at this. So when I sorted the numbers, the 28 guys that were in this list, if you then sort the players by games started, which kind of flips the list upside down, George Kittle, Aaron Hernandez, and Pat Freiermuth all look a lot like him in terms of receiving yards. The funny part is he had 17 less targets than any of those guys and had relative receiving yards to every single one of them. So a highly explosive player. The other part about Chig, when you're looking at it, is that last year was the tight end 11 in yards after the catch per reception at 7.8, and that was ahead of every single relevant fantasy tight end. He was the tight end 11, but again, that's a lot of guys with lower target share above him. Every other tight end in the NFL was lower than that number. Now, obviously, the addition of DeAndre Hopkins probably hurt some of his upside in 2023, also in what should be a run-heavy offense, but people shouldn't forget, and maybe they didn't know this, Tennessee was number 3 in the league last year in tight end rate at 28%. So the opportunity certainly exists. And just to add a little more juice to his profile, when setting a threshold at 20 total targets, Chig was the tight end 1 in yards per route run at 2.61. Yes, ahead of Travis Kelce. So very interesting profile. A guy that, again, only 46 targets last year, but incredible athleticism, a realistic opportunity. Derrick Henry, probably not here forever. And when guys break out this early, they're certainly the type of tight ends that you should keep tabs on because it doesn't happen very often.
You can envision a scenario that, they potentially move on from Tannehill. Henry, potentially moves on as well. They drafted Will Levis. We don't know what he is yet, but I mean, they've drafted Treylon Burks. They've signed Hopkins. I think they really want to eventually start throwing the ball a lot more and, switch maybe to more of a pass heavy offense. And if that's the case, you want a guy that's, young and is very good at yards after the catch at the tight end position.
I mean, it wouldn't shock me. And I think we've talked about this off air in the past. Like, it wouldn't shock me if we look up in 2 years and Tennessee looks a lot like the Bills do now, a more high volume, explosive team. They can play good defense. They have sound coaching. It wouldn't shock me. So I think you're exactly right. I think we have to be forward thinking, especially in Dynasty. It's a really important aspect of how to play this format. So Chig is definitely one of those guys. Now, again, when talking about long shots, as this list goes on, they get longer and longer. This to me might be one of the longer shots considering where he ended up, but opportunity tends to reveal itself time and time again. That is Richie James of the Kansas City Chiefs. Why is Richie James a long shot?
Well, Richie James is a long shot because there's such a crowded wide receiver room there in Kansas City. You got the hype of Justin Ross, and I love Justin Ross, and Rashid Rice was drafted in the second round, and he's looked pretty good. And you got Sky Moore they drafted last year in the second round. You've got, you still got Travis Kelce there. And then they have MVS. It's a very crowded wide receiver room. So it's a long shot for him because, where does he fit into that offense, right? He kind of played relatively in the slot. He was heavily targeted targeted from weeks 11 to 17 for the Giants, averaging 14 fantasy points per game, had 4 touchdowns. And during that time span, because he was playing in the slot, he was first in catch rate among all wide receivers, minimum 45 targets. That's just all any receiver out there. So yeah, he's like sneakily good, and you can come back and look back a few weeks from now, sorry. And Justin Ross has had an injury history. Tony is already hurt, and Richie James is sneaking in there in 3 wide receiver sets.
It's entirely possible. Injuries happen. The other part of it is, and I know people don't want to hear this, you've got Moore, you've got Rice, you've got Tony. I don't know if any of those guys are good yet. They could all be average players. They're all going to get opportunity. That's what we know, right? But I don't know who's the best out of the group. I don't know who will be good. I don't know who will be great, but injuries can happen. Now, I know everybody wants us and me to talk about the prince of the 2023 summer, Justin Ross, but I'm not going to do it. I'm not ready to do it. I'm not willing to do it. He's on the back of the roster. He's probably going to make it. It's hype season. We'll probably talk about him in another video. But with that said, you kind of alluded to this already, but Richie James played a career high out of the slot last year, 84.5% slot rate. I mean, that's insanely high. That was 36.4% more than at any point prior to that. And then when we look at him on Player Profile last year, James was the wide receiver 11 in route win rate. So again, really impressive numbers there. So he's winning off the line of scrimmage. But then the buzz that I keep hearing out of training camp is that he was originally going to be a depth piece on this roster. Then through camp, he worked his way into punt return, kick return duties, and then most importantly, recently with Kadarius Toney being sidelined a little bit, they've been using Richie James in that Kadarius Toney role, sort of that shifty open field playmaker. Because the thing about Richie James is he's really not a deep threat. Again, going back to his time at Middle Tennessee, not really a deep threat. Despite last year, 57 receptions for 569 yards. That's not really his role, but he's so good after the catch. He's so dynamic with the ball in his hands. And really, that's kind of what Kansas City needs, right? That's the whole Toney factor. That could be the factor that he brings to the table as well. On top of that, the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs are on record as trying to trade for him back when he was on San Francisco. So they finally got the guy that once upon a time they were actually targeting. So again, is he better suited for best ball? Probably. But as you mentioned, injuries can happen. They can pile up quickly. And Patrick Mahomes is notorious for getting the ball to his players and spreading it around. So anything is possible in this offense.
Absolutely. And I think, just one of those situations like, what if Richie James just discount Kadarius Toney? He's what Kadarius Toney was always meant to be, and Toney just doesn't come back from these myriad of injuries that he continuously has.
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. Okay, last player on this list, and again, I'm going to go on record and say, of all these players, I actually think there's a higher likelihood that this guy makes like a significant fantasy impact because of the volatility of the position. That's DeWayne McBride of the Minnesota Vikings. Why is DeWayne McBride a long shot that people should keep tabs on?
He's a long shot you keep tabs on because really outside of Alexander Madison on the Vikings, there's really no one else that could compete for that starting role. He could easily be that RB2, even at the start of the season. 7th round pick, but, he had, 95th percentile yards per carry, 93rd percentile college dominator. He's got good size. He's a big guy. He's not super fast, but again, he was an extremely efficient runner. 1,700 yards his final year for 19 touchdowns. And, the Vikings with Dalvin Cook were top 5 in red zone touches. So if Madison goes down, he's already kind of heard some rumors about, his injury, but this is a player that the team is interested and slightly invested in, but it could easily happen that where he gets hurt and can't handle the full workload, and we see DeWayne McBride, lighten up the scoreboard, week 12 and on. So
listen, we see this every year. Khalil Herbert comes out of nowhere and gets opportunity and plays well. DeWayne McBride is one of the more prolific rushing profiles that we've seen over the last couple of years. Again, rushing profiles. Okay. For those of you, statisticians that know his background, please make sure you understand that I said the word rushing. But again, you mentioned it just like that. Alexander Madison already on the injury report, already pulled up, limping a little bit. Obviously, he's going to be ready for week 1. Okay. So for all the Alexander truthers, calm down. But the point is, you look at this roster, you look at this depth chart, and no offense to the Vikings fans, but it stinks. Okay, your depth chart stinks. It's 100% athleticism and then DeWayne McBride, right? You've got Chandler, you've got Nwangu. That's your third back. That's all you have. So meanwhile, McBride, again, one of the better profiles, 5'10", 215 pounds. You look at what he did coming out of college. Ranked 7th in all of college in forced missed tackles was 76. Ranked 2nd overall in yards after contact per attempt at 4.6, only behind Roshan. Ranked 3rd in total yards after contact with over 1,000. Ranked 3rd in carries of greater than 15 yards with 25, a breakaway run rate of 52.2%. However, he flopped nearly as bad as A.J. Dillon in one other very important category, and I brought this up earlier. I drew a line under what my phrasing. I said rushing. He's not a pass catcher, okay? Doesn't mean he can't do a little bit of it, but if you weren't a pass catcher in college, you probably won't be a pass catcher in the pros. But somehow, in 30 collegiate games, he had 10 targets, not catches, 10 targets in 30 college games. So again, sadly for the Madison Truthers, the fact that he was not targeted in college still really doesn't matter to me all that much in the grand scheme of things, because you look at Madison, the RB30 and overall per year contract, that's actually behind Samaje Perine. That's behind Gus Edwards when we want to talk about a priority pecking order. You didn't mention this yet on the show, but you mentioned it previously. This is a team that could very easily go get one of these street free agents, right? There's a bunch of bigger names floating around, Zeke, Fournette, right? Any of these guys could get sucked right up into this offense pretty quickly. But again, he wasn't being paid. So with an injury to Madison or inefficiency, if you open up the door for a guy like McBride who has this level of rushing ability, it's not an impossibility that he could jump him on the roster. Chase Edmonds flopped the hell out of town last year, had a contract. Everybody said follow the money. Where the hell did that get him on 2 teams last year, right?
And this is a top 5 offense with the best wide receiver in football, right? And they've added other weapons onto the team with Addison and Hawkinson last year. I mean, they're going to be in the red zone. I mean, if Alexander Madison's out, this guy's going to be getting all the red zone touches. If they don't, again, it's a long shot. They could sign a veteran, someone like Zeke Elliott or Leonard Fournette. But if they don't, this is the guy you want outside of Alexander Madison.
This guy's a monster. Look, he's got the requisite size. He's crazy after contact. Injuries happen. I'm willing to bet he gets starter snaps this year. And I'm not saying he just jumps Madison, but I'm saying an injury will happen. It happens to every running back, right? So with that being said, on this depth chart, anything is possible. And I am 100% looking to stash DeWayne McBride at the keep trade cut value of the wide receiver 50 or the running back 55. He's right next to Jerick McKinnon. Zach Evans, who is nowhere with a telescope. Google Earth can't find Zach Evans right now. So I love his price tag. He's a guy that you can stash early. Let everybody buy into the athleticism of Ty Chandler, of Nwangu, whatever. Okay. This is not the first time. Look at Isaiah Pacheco. Okay. This can happen. It can happen very, very quickly. That's a championship team, by the way. That's a Super Bowl contending team with the best quarterback in football and possibly the best quarterback in the history of football when it's all said and done. And they literally took a guy named Isaiah Pacheco and just climbed him right up the flagpole, made him a starter, and that was the end of it. So don't confuse yourselves and pretend like this isn't a high likelihood and very possible outcome. So with that being said, everybody, thank you again for checking out this video. This one was probably even spicier. I'm sure they're going to get spicier as the future goes on. Who are some other really long shot names that you think should be added to this list that we should keep our eyes on, or the other viewers of this who check the comments below should keep their eyes on? Again, as I mentioned in other videos, what type of content do you want us to make next? Drop that in the comments. Of course, hit like. Check out the website, dynastyrankings.com, where our rankings will officially be located in the very near future. And of course, join the Discord channel, link in the description. Growing Discord channel with a great community, a lot of fun people constantly talking football, talking trades, talking theory. I drop in sometimes. Maybe Alexander will drop in there. I don't know. We've got to peer pressure him to join. So drop in the comments, pressure him to come join. And again, guys, we're going to be dropping multiple videos a week. So please check those out. Help support the channel because we're having a lot of fun and we continue to produce videos into the future. So again, we will see you guys on the next one.